What's up, guys? Welcome back to Muscle Minds with Scott Stevenson. We are joined today by Andrew Berry, and today we are doing our tribute to John Meadows. I'm excited to do this, and it was something we wanted. I wanted a little bit of time for. I thought, initially the first thought would be to talk about how much we care about John and, how much John will be missed. And now that we've had a little time to kind of work through some of that stuff, and we've talked about it through some of the various programs and individually on our own through our social media and everything else, my thought was, why don't we do a podcast that John would love? And I know that the last year, Scott and I had John on. We did a podcast that I titled Principles of Mountain Dog Training. And I remember after we were done, he said, man, I freaking loved this. He was like, I'm feeling so pumped right now. Like, I want to go train. And I thought to myself, why don't we do a podcast that John would freaking love to be on? So today we are going to talk about things we learned from John Meadows, especially related to training. Scott, I know you've got some figures here. I should mention too, for people who are not as familiar with us, Scott Stevenson in the middle is the co-author of The Brutality of Mountain Dog Training, John's book. So I felt like if there's anybody who would have some good thoughts to say, it would be Scott. And then, of course, Andrew has worked closely with John, being both a Mountain Dog approved coach and having been coached by John for years now and being friends with John as well. I haven't had the same relationship as you guys have to John. In fact, John's somebody that I always kind of held in a little bit of a pedestal, and getting to have him on the programs had always been a huge honor to me. Like, he had always been one of my favorite guests, and he had meant so much to me in my training. So I'm really excited to dig into this and to do a podcast that I know that he would love to be on.
Right on.
Scott?
Yeah.
Where do we take this, man? How do we dig in?
Well, it was interesting. Go ahead, Andrew.
I was going to say, maybe we all start with a training story of, or maybe me and Scott tell a training story of, a particular workout or something with John.
I'd love to hear that.
All right. You sound like you have one in mind.
I've gone over this one before, but I flew out to train with John for a week, like in 2000. It's either 16 or 17. I can't remember. It was 2016 because he was like 4 or 5 weeks out from the Arnold. And he had told me, or as soon as I got through the door, his wife, Mary, was like, so everybody in the house was sick last week, including John. We're going to give you the option. Like, we'll get you a hotel down the street, or you can stay here. We sanitized everything. And I'm like, I want to spend time with John and the family. Like, I'll stay here. I don't care if I get sick. So, we go to the gym, and like everything's fine. And then towards the evening, we're having his diet back then was he was eating a lot of white fish, a little bit of rice, and black beans. So he made me a plate of that. And this is like our fourth or fifth meal of the day. And I get through half of it, and I'm like, man, I'm just not hungry. And John was like a little weirded out because he's like, you eat a lot of food. Like, what's going on here? I'm like, I'm just going to wrap it up, and I'll eat it in a little while. Well, I didn't eat the rest of the night. What I did do was I woke up around 2 or 3 in the morning, and I puked my guts out.
Aww.
And I'm like, but in my mind, I'm like, no, I'm not sick. I'm just excited to train tomorrow because we have legs on deck. So I'm like, okay, I'll hydrate, and I'll get a Gatorade in me, and I'll go back to bed. So I went back to sleep, and I think I woke up again at like 5 a.m. and I puked again. And I'm like, man, I'm really excited to train legs today. This is crazy.
Real pumped.
This is going to be good. So at least if I get it out now, I'm not going to puke during the training session. So anyway, we get up, and I'm able to eat a little pre-workout bowl, and I feel okay. But the minute we get to the gym, and this was at Lifetime Fitness, which is like more of a corporate fitness center versus a hardcore gym.
Yeah.
I'm like, John, I got to run to the bathroom. So I ran to the bathroom, and of course I puked up that whole first meal.
Oh.
But I'm still in my head. I'm like, or at this point, and I was dripping sweat, and I'm like, okay, I'm sick, but I think I can make it through this workout. I'll be okay.
Yeah.
When I tell you that I told John, I was like, I'm feeling sick, but don't hold back. Let's do this. And when I tell you that I literally puked probably 12 times during that workout, like I puked 12 times.
Oh my God.
I would do a set of the leg press, go over to the trash cans in the middle of the whole gym, and just like, and I had nothing left. That was, I was trying to drink Intra to try to get it back in me. And I'm getting like hypoglycemic because we were doing some crazy stuff. We did like I think a 40 rep leg press drop set. And then we did like we did a cluster set with where we went right from leg extensions right into we did a cluster set on leg extensions, and then finished it off with as many steps as you could take lunging around the gym without any weight. And then like I just laid down and I was like out. And as soon as we got home, John's like, you want me to try to get you some food? And I'm like, no. I just went up to the room and I slept for like 6 hours.
I bet.
because in my mind I was like, I need to recover and sleep so I can go back and train back with him tomorrow. And
Right.
and we did. And again, I did do that. And on the plane ride home, like maybe 3 days later, I was still like really sick. I was like on the plane, dripping sweat. I looked like a drug addict. And the lady sitting next to me calls over the flight attendant, and she's like, this guy right here, like, can you move me? I could hear her saying that. And the flight attendant moved her out of my seat because I was just sitting there like drip, drip, drip. And I was so empty at that point, I had nothing left to throw up because I hadn't eaten in like 2 days at that point. But that was one of my favorite times training with him, even though it was as, drastic as it was, because also at the end of the trip, he's like, I would have pulled out. Like if I had the flu, I'm not training.
Yeah.
He's like, so I got to give you some respect for hanging in there with me and helping push. Because he was like, you were pushing me still. I'm 3-4 weeks out from the Arnold. So I really enjoyed that experience personally. So that's my story.
You know what's crazy is, I mean, like this. I'm going to throw some physiology because John loves when you got a fever, like your set point changes, so you shouldn't be sweating unless the fever's breaking. That's what happens when the fever breaks, is your body's getting better, and now your set point, you're still hot, but you sweat because your set points come down, and now you have the sweating happening. I think you were sweating because you were so fucked up from all the training that your epoch was massive, and you just had, your body was just like, what the fuck? Because you normally wouldn't be sweating like that,
My body was definitely like, what in the fuck are you doing to it? Like the muscles felt like in between sets, it was like I was numb. And then I was still strong though. I was still like able to just churn. Like I think we started a drop set with like 13 plates on the leg press and did like 8, and then he'd pull a plate and I'd get 4 more, and he'd pull a plate and get 3 more, and so we just did one of those like long drop sets until basically you can't move the bar or the rack anymore. And but you're right. Like my body was just like, what are you doing to me, man?
John had a nice way, and you can hear it in his videos, and everyone who's trained with him, like the way he encourages you it was like forceful, but it was also like, I'm with you. It was just the energy of the way that he talked to you during the set was so encouraging in just the right manner. He knew how to kind of coax you along to get you to do shit, that most people would never even think about doing. Because he's got you. Like he's not like trying to be an asshole.
Yeah.
He loves you. That's why he wants you to work hard, and that's why he's telling you to go all at once.
That's 100% spot on. That's 100% spot on. He's like, I'm with you now. Like, all right, let's go. Give me 3 more. Yeah. I'm with you. I got you. 3 more. 2 more. 1 more. Okay, deep breath. Okay, now let's do another 3 more. You got this. I'm with you. I got you. I got the bar. Let's go. And he can be there right with you. You're 100% right. It's almost like he's a little guy on your shoulder that's just like clicking the things in your brain like, you can do 3 more. You thought you were going to fail, but no, you can do 3 more.
Yeah, right? That makes sense. It's not like a punishment where he's making you do it because he's trying to be mean. It's an encouragement. I get that. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. You can hear, if you play the videos, of not just with us training, but like everyone, you can sense that he's right along, because he's been there 1,000,001 times,
Yeah.
He knows what that set feels like because he's done them. He probably just did it just before you, to show you how he wants you to have it done. So yeah, he's right there. I'm trying to think, like all these like training, sessions with John over the years coming through. I remember I was running through the book which you have some clips from, some screenshots from, and I forgot we put in the PhD versus Meathead video. That was, I think it was the same weekend that the horse balls video came from.
Okay.
Where we trained with Dave at the original Elite FDS, and that's the. I don't remember if did I tell the horse ball story?
I would love to hear it again. I would, if you have. It's been a little while.
Well, it's in the tribute video that I did, and that was the same. I think that was the same workout. I'm counting. Maybe it was the same weekend because we did. There's so many that kind of blend together. And Dave was kind of running us through the ringer. And Dave had us doing we started off with these fucking 2-minute long hamstring bridge things that he came up with. He's like, I want you guys to try this. So it's like a pre-pump hamstring exercise. And then that was the weekend when the Romanian split squat of death came into existence. Was that very weekend. That was, part of Dave and John's, invention.
Love child meeting of the minds.
Yeah. Like there's a picture somewhere, because I did that before. I think I might have gone before John. Like I did that same weekend with him, but there's just a picture of me with Shrek with his arms around the squat rack.
Yeah.
I set Shrek up there for encouragement for us. So, but when John got done with that first warm-up set with Dave, and after the whole workout, because a lot of it was hamstring oriented, that literally John's hamstring, because his legs, they look like they rivaled Tom Platz's back in his heyday. They were just crazy. And afterwards, we're getting interviewed and we're talking about what happened. And that's when, in the clip people can find in that tribute video, you just go to YouTube and click in John Meadows horse balls. Dave's trying to explain what we're doing in the workout and how, like, the only thing he'd come up with to kind of describe what John's hamstring looked like when he was, sitting into a side leg shot was like just a big pair of horse balls just hanging right there, So, like, fast forward this was probably when I was in Arizona, I think, when that happened. So I come to Florida, and I was looking around for gyms here in Tampa, and I had an LA Fitness membership, which I thought was nationwide, which apparently wasn't. I used it many times. No one called me on it. And I go into an LA Fitness here to try it out. And there's some good ones and some bad ones. You never know. And I got called on it at the desk. It's like, you can't train here. This is a Florida LA Fitness membership. I'm like, and I honestly didn't know that. I thought it was, because everyone just let me in the door. But this was a young woman who's, I think it was her first week on the job, so she's being a stickler about things. And the membership manager comes over and walks over to see what's going on, to figure out, what to do with me. And he's like, I'll take care of you. And he calls me over to the desk where they usually sign people up for personal training and things. And he sits down and he's looking at his computer, and he's like, your name's like, okay. He's like, I don't worry, I know your name. Horseball. I just watched you on YouTube like yesterday. And I'm like, oh shit. So John got me in. I got a free training, session at LA Fitness that day, because the guy knew who I was from the Horseballs video. So
that's awesome.
That was good clickbait right there. That's as good as he gets.
That's excellent.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I found that picture too. Here's that shot.
Oh yeah. Right.
That's a great shot. Yeah.
That was crazy. That was so much fun.
That is cool, man.
How about the first time? Because that was the first time you did that, right, Scott?
That was the Smith squat death set. Yeah, it's the first time anyone did it. Like, we came up with it. So yeah.
So that was the first time you did the drop set of death, right? How about, like, the first time you got done doing that, you're like, oh, I need to start doing these like every single week. Like, you knew exactly where it hits you on the high part of the hamstring and a little bit in the glute, and like. When I show people how to do it, like, the first time, they're like, wait, so you're just going to do one leg and you're not going to go alternate? I'm like, oh, no. Like, you're going to need like 5 minutes after you get done that first leg, and you're going to want to watch me do it, because, like, you're going to be like you're going to be walking away, but you're going to be walking in circles, because that left leg that you just did isn't going to move. Like, you're just going to be going around like a merry-go-round.
Yes. Yeah. John had those in the program that I don't know I think it came out now, that he had Derek Oslin do, that I tagged along with.
Yeah.
And so we did those at the beginning of that program. And one of the times we decided, because of that, like, we wanted to just get it all done, we alternated, I think, which may have been an option, maybe it wasn't. And it was like a 15-minute set. Yeah, we just left, right, back and forth. Which, of course, made it harder in a sense, because you're a little refreshed, and you can get more reps, and you can hold longer. So you're not fatiguing as quickly. And it took fucking forever.
But that's, and the oxygen deprivation at that point, you must just be like,
it was ridiculous. It was just, pitiful. We actually took that same strategy, and I told John about this, and he loved the idea. I think we talked about it on the phone. And it's because I had this problem with my leg that I'm still kind of figuring out. So the unilateral stuff doesn't work, but I figured out how I could do bilateral stuff, and we were doing a lot of hack squats. So we took that same strategy and just applied it to a bilateral, where we did the hold at the end, and that was like only like a 6-minute set, but continuous, with people pulling the weight from you, so there's like nothing in between, and that's just a beautiful, basically it's the mentality of those challenge sets, which is just like, it's like getting on a roller coaster, man. It was like, fuck it, we're just gonna do the hardest. most asinine, ridiculous thing we can, but it's going to be thought out. We're trying to hit something intentionally, but it's like we just taking the governor off and just fucking going for it. And that was.
I think the lesson. I think the lesson there is that just at the end of the day, hard work above any type of intelligent programming. It's just hard work, because those sets are just straight mind over matter. Because your legs, after you get done the second round or third round, you want to be done, and you need someone in your ear to be like, come on, let's go, fourth round, fifth round, let's do this. So I do think that it just comes down to the old school, hard work's gonna do it all for you. If you just bite down and do it.
I like that.
Yeah. And being when John was there, how much he loved to train, so it just made you want to train more, and because it was just fun with him no matter what. And I remember that's what kind of got us going on being an elite FTS with Dave, and John was because John's low back was not happy with him after all the training, so he always had to fly first class, not because he just wanted to be a VIP, but just because he needed the good chairs so he could move around with his back. And that day was not a good day for his back, so he didn't do that challenge set on the we could kind of a rack. It was pulling off a block with chains, and but John was there, and he was watching Dave, and actually everyone else bowed out except for me and Dave. Actually, by that time, just the two of us. I froze. Do you guys still see me?
We can see you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. We see you. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, you guys froze too. So we're loading this up, and Dave's running the show here because Dave picked the exercise, I think. And so I'm just this, I'm like the outside party. I'm just going along for the ride, but having a lot of fun with it, doing whatever. So Dave threw some plates on there, and he's just warming up to something that seems asinine, So he just keeps on putting chains on and putting chains on and putting chains on, and we're warming up, and it's just going to be as many reps as you can get, challenge set. Just keep going until there's absolutely nothing left, or until you start to break form. And I remember, I remember exactly how the exchange went. I think Dave was sitting on the bench. He had his hoodie on. He's getting into his mindset. And you've trained with Dave before, Andrew.
No, unfortunately, I have not.
Okay.
No, we were going to go out to the new complex one time, but it just didn't work out schedule wise for John. But anyway,
yeah, he gets dark.
Oh, I've seen it.
I've seen that in the videos too. Yeah.
I like to go there too sometimes. It depends on the day. I can be Ronnie Coleman-esque and yeah, buddy, have fun. And then there are times when it's I want to destroy all the dark matter in the universe and make it mine, that kind of shit. And this was one of those. Dave was going there, and we were building up for this. It was literally the last two standing. That's why he titled the video PhD versus Death. But it was still fun. It was we're two brothers in arms. It wasn't we're really trying to kill each other, but we were at the same time because that's what we wanted to do. And I remember Dave sitting there on the bench, and we're getting ready. Now we got to the weight we're going to use, and Dave says something he's I'm going to hell on this. And I think I just turned to him without skipping a beat, because I was in the same spot. I said, I look forward to seeing you there, brother. And we did. We just went off, and it was so much fucking fun to do that. It was just such a blast.
I like that.
So yeah, so that's how it was, with Dave, of course. Even though he was going to the dark places, he was I remember there was a time when I was running one of a guy that I think had been one of Dave's trainees. He was a powerlifter who was at one of the Learn to Train seminars, running through muscle rounds, and Dave could be, get really show me what you're made of, but he always is there as he's just the penultimate educator at the same time, and because he wanted the best for you, which is why John and he got along so well, because they had that so much in common. So it was the energy of those two guys together was really, really cool. And
I can only imagine.
I got a question.
Yeah.
I have a question. So obviously I think that most of the people who follow Think Big are very familiar with John, and they're very familiar with Mountain Dog training. But if you had to describe what Mountain Dog training is, and I'd be interested to hear either of your answers. What is Mountain Dog training?
I would say it's an intelligently thought out, layered program, and I'm not just talking about an individual workout, I'm talking about the extent of whether it's an 8-week, a 10-week, or a 16-week program, because I'll give you an example. People will like write to me, they'll be like, so week 4, there's only like 4 exercises, and like I'm doing a total of 9 sets of whatever program. I'm like, buckle your seatbelt up, just wait. Like, there's a reason for this. There's a built-in deload into the program, because at the end, did you look at the back workout at the end of the week? Like, you're basically doing 2 hard back workouts this week, so your pump day is going to be a little easier for the next 4 weeks, that kind of thing. And that's what I mean by intelligently thought out, because John, I think, understood more than anybody that, we have a certain amount of recovery ability based off of our nutritional status, our age, our PED usage. And like, if you worked with him one-on-one, you would get a lot more of that. The programming is great, but if you worked with them one-on-one, okay, you're at this point in your cruise period now. Okay, maybe we should drop your volume down a little bit, and we'll just do 4 training days this week instead of 5, because you're not getting the same muscle protein synthesis from the lack of, lower PEDs, that kind of thing. Yeah. Or if you had a particularly stressful period of time, like you're traveling for work left and right, okay, let's try to get 3 good sessions in. So there was intelligent thought going into the programming versus just, pound in the program. You need to follow the 5 days a week or 6 days a week programming as it's written. Right. And then looking at the individual workout, I think the layering of the workout in terms of like, the pre-pump activation phase, the high threshold motor unit stuff, the super maximal pump, and then the stretching, that just like clicked for me when he explained it to me one day. It's like, oh, like, yeah, you do want to pre-activate and make sure your muscles are healthy to do what you want to do today.
Sure.
And I think if you explain this to people that haven't done it, they're like, oh, so you're just doing like really light stuff, 3 sets of 10 or something like that. And I'm like, oh no, it's still going to be a very hard exercise. Like, you're going to go as heavy as you can on, say, a dumbbell press or, a hamstring curl. You're just not going to jump into a squat fresh out of into the gym, or a barbell bench press first into the gym, like you traditionally see a lot of people do. There's a component built in there for safety to make sure that the muscles and the surrounding tissue are warmed up, making sure that your nervous system is activated, and then you'll move on to a more traditional, I guess, starter exercise like a barbell press or an incline barbell press.
Yeah. And
then you move on to the super maximal pump stuff, where that was always my favorite part of the routines, is like usually the 3rd exercise in, when some of those crazy exercises that Scott just referred to, like with the Bulgarian split squats, or the, fitting in a drop set of death on the hack squat or the leg press, that's where that kind of stuff comes in. And so if someone looks at the paper and they're like, oh, there's only like 4 to 7 working sets here, like this seems too easy. It's like, just buckle your seatbelt up, follow the program as it's written, and you're going to have a good time.
I love that.
Yeah. I was trying to like encapsulate sort of intelligent, well thought out, brutal insanity, kind of all wrapped up into one, because the nature of the beast is that you're doing something you're trying to create something you've never created before. That's what weight training and bodybuilding is all about. You're trying to build a beast, trying to build a monster. So, you can't, like, if you can't, piece together a monster, a Frankenstein, supersede what your body wants to do by just gently coaxing it.
Yeah.
But you got to be smart about how you do it too. And that's what John kind of figured out. And it was, it's funny because I remember like first before I even knew John, I remember like seeing some of the things like back on the T Nation side, I think. And some of it, like this was like, so I'm like, some of this is sort of Weider, principle sort of recapitulated. It's like, nah, it's because there's some rhyme and reason to that. Like Weider always gets like, it's Weider principle, like whatever. Like the one that always gets so much shit is the muscle confusion principle, right?
Yeah.
And like how many articles you could probably Google. I haven't done this, but if you Google like, muscle confusion principle, everyone's like picking on that. It's like, that's just bullshit. And it's like, no, that's variety in training. That's a basic training principle. And there's actually one of the figures that is in, actually, let me see which one it was so what it's a table with check marks in it, Scott.
Okay.
I thought we'd be able to use these.
Cool, yeah.
Yeah.
Scott's always got his charts on hand, his graphs.
Yeah, this was one, I think this was something I wanted to throw in there just because it made sense to me. So these are some of the intensification techniques that John uses, and there's more now, like cluster set. This is from the Brutality of Mountain Dog Training book, for those who are wondering, which we're going to try to put out maybe in a hardcover at some point down the road here.
I'd love that.
But yeah, so those are the across the top, or the different principles or different ways in which weight training turns on and anabolism produces muscle growth. So mechanical tension, metabolic stress, muscle damage, and then activation pattern is one that sort of I like to always throw in there. And so back to, what John was figuring out, which seems like it was, on the surface, if you don't look into things, he's just always rehashing some of these weirder training principles. It's like, no, activation pattern is important too. That's what, picking something you've never done before. That's like, finding an exercise you haven't done before, doing it in a different way. And John and I, when we went through this whole table together to sort of weight these things, remember, like, we had a phone conversation about this, so that rightmost column is activation pattern. Activation pattern, you get a different activation pattern when you do an exercise you haven't done for a long time. Because it's novel. That's why, and I use the same example all the time. You take someone who's doing like regular deadlifts, and they do that for months on end, and finally they kind of plateau, and they decide to swap that out in their exercise rotation for banded or chains or deficit deads or rack deads, and they do the same number of sets or same number of reps with the same effort level, and they get sore as shit. So no, it's too small for almost for me to read.
Oh, okay. I didn't know you were actually reading off of it.
No, it's okay.
Right,
I want to be able to
I'll blow it back up.
We're good.
I didn't want to cover up our faces for too long.
Yeah, right. You can cover mine up. So the activation pattern is what's different there. It's a different exercise. It feels different. There's got to be a different activation pattern. And that then is a novelty, and you see that in the muscle soreness that you get. And when we were figuring out how to like make sense of this, John brought me in to help put together the book, to kind of be the sciencey guy, to lend some science to what he'd figured out, without having to glean it from the scientific literature. He figured out in the trenches and the science. And so you take, this, it's a muscle confusion principle bullshit. It's like, no, it's activation pattern. This changes changes the way in which the motor units are activated. Potentially one of the things that causes muscle soreness, which you see in that example with deadlifts I gave. And when you look at the different intensification techniques, those are way in differentially in terms of that particular mechanism whereby you can turn on and create a novel stimulus for muscle growth. So John has thought all this kind of stuff through, and that's when you see that and this is the artistry of what he was doing with mountain dog training, and you don't realize this if you just look at the individual workouts and just try to count sets and reps, is that when he's changing those intensification techniques week by week in the programs that he did and then wrote out and then produced, he was doing that in an auto-regulatory fashion, knowing what had been done previously because he'd done it. And like and he knew like this is the intensification technique or not to do for this muscle because this is what had gone through. He wasn't just sort of like hashing this. He didn't like write those out on paper, never having done those programs. He did them. And like, so this is like a sciencey way to break down what John was intuiting and sensing is like, today is the day to do partials, or the day today is to do, a superset, or maybe not, whatever it might be. And these were the ways in which those things actually were working from a scientific perspective. But John knew that, from his empirical perspective of the guy in the trenches, turning himself into a monster like he did with so many other people. So, so that was sort of a first impression of mountain dog training, but that's the well thought out part of it. That was really kind of cool. It's sort of like, and this is why he wanted, because this is really kind of was such an honor that he said, "Hey Scott, can you help me write this book?" Because he's like, I know from the conversations we have, like, I know you're going to be able to like see the stuff that I'm doing and make it sound really smart. And I'm like, okay, I can do that. Like
to that point, I want to add in, because like John's a really smart guy, but he was always so smart to know who are the other smart people in the room who can explain something better than I can.
I love
whether
that.
It's a nutritional or a hormonal thing or a training thing, and the adaptations, the intensity techniques. Because like we can say, oh, let's just do something crazy. We'll do drop sets and iso holds. And the average person just doesn't really think scientifically about what's going on in terms of the mechanical tension, the metabolic stress, etc. But I think when you guys put out that book, it really did open up some eyes. Like, oh, there is a lot of complex thought in how he's layering this stuff. And I thought that bringing you in was like the best thing he could have done.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun to do, man. It was really cool to put that together.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Scott, what would you say is something that you learned from training with John? And that might be tougher for you because you've, obviously had a ton of your own experience before you guys had met, and you had a ton of experience with DC training. Meeting him, and I know it's kind of tough to put you on the spot here with that, but can you think of anything that you can say, hey, I hadn't thought of that before you guys had met and began working together in the gym?
Like, I'm trying to think of something kind of, the thing that was fun about John and I was we were a lot of times we'd have conversations and we'd be thinking the same thing at the same time, you know? So we would kind of jinx ourselves a lot on things. But I think one of the things that it's been resonating since we talked, you mentioned doing this, and especially this morning, is that John helped me recognize how important, even more so than I ever had before, how auto-regulating is important, and how recognizing when it's a day to go.
Yeah.
When you got it in the tank and you want to go after it, then do it. And when it's not the day to do whatever exercise or what have you, to pull away from that.
That's huge.
And it's gigantic. Because that's the thing that, it's built into his program because he ran through and did those things. So he would pull back on some of those days. I remember training with Derek in this earlier this year. And we're he was building up during part of the program, and I'd always kind of look forward, and he's like, we're not going to be able to keep this up. I'm like, oh, don't worry, John knows what's up, he'll bring it back. And then a couple of those days, it's hey, what's going on? This isn't, as tough as it should be. But it's no, we need this because there's something crazy coming, and he's going to kick our ass next week. So that was him, auto-regulating and pulling things back in a way that it just totally makes sense.
Huh.
That's that smart, push forward. Even in that, I clicked on, because I forgot it was in the book, I clicked on that PhD versus meathead set, and I remember I got to that very last rep, and I could see I was going to keep on going, and I could see my back was starting to go the wrong direction. And John, immediately, he's like, okay, you're done, you're good. He was all right up to the wall. It's like stop. He pulled the switch right off the bat when it was time. And that's what he was really, really good at, is trusting in that intuition that you have to have, to train, safely and to train productively. And that really, the thing is that there's so many instances where, you see people who train themselves right up into kind of what science would call a functional overreaching period, and they pull back on their diet and they eat some more. So one of the things John would say, when we had this conversation, you probably did this many times, Andrew, is your weight drops, you get a big drop in your body weight. He'd just go to Five Guys and have 2 burgers, something like that. I know that was one of his strategies, and it's what are you talking about? It's but he'd done that so many times himself with so many people. It's that's okay. You don't have to constantly beat yourself into the ground. Got to be smart about this. So walking that line of brutality and craziness, but at the same time keeping your wits about you in terms of how the training progression is happening, in terms about how the diet is happening, the refeeds are happening, simultaneously is a crazy juggling act that John was really good at. And it's about trusting yourself to some degree. And so John was a really nice mirror, so to speak, and a sounding board and an example of how smart that really is. To take that, it's sort of keep on having this image of welding together the monster, and you've got this torch or this, welding device that's, 7,000 degrees Fahrenheit, and you could just melt through it's, you could just cut through the metal if you wanted to, but that's not the point. The point is to schmied these things together, to weld these things together in the right way. And you've got this ultimate power of, you could drive yourself into the ground, but you have to wield that appropriately. and use it at the right time in your training at the right time with the right exercises, and use that drive to push yourself dietarily, let's say, or with cardio if you're doing that, to get yourself to that crazy lean conditioning, but not lose muscle just, because you just push yourself beyond where you need to go. Constantly, so that balancing act was something. So the cool thing about it, especially for people who worked with John or who listen to a lot of John's videos, and I think that's, if you can just hear him in your head, hear his voice in your head. He's a coach there in a sense. Like, what would John say? Like, I think I said that in my tribute video. Like, what would JM do would be a great T-shirt to have. Like literally when you're in the depths of a pre-contest period, it's like, what would JM do? And he might go have some Five Guys, and if you can just hear what he would say, like, that's a really wise voice to listen to, I think. So kind of the thing, I guess, to answer your question is that John helped me realize that there's a wisdom that I can tap into in my own head, that I should pay attention to.
I like that. Yeah. I like that. I feel like one of the things, there was a lot of things that when I started learning about in mountain dog training that resonated with me, things that already had made sense. And what I got from him initially was I got hope that I could continue training hard even with limitations. Like my lower back had been really messy for a while, but I learned that didn't mean that I had to like, it didn't mean I couldn't still grow, and I think one of the things that he had always done that I think is really great is the creativity that he would have in the gym with his exercises and the way he thought. When you just look at a plan written on paper and it says, hamstring curls 3 sets, leg extensions 3 sets, whatever, squats or whatever, 3 sets, and leg press 3 sets. It's like that. It's pretty, it doesn't really say much, but there's an art to how we carry our sets out. And I think that he put a lot of passion and heart into the way that he trained. And that's what I think I really picked up from him, was having that freedom to be creative and play with your exercises, and to think about, like, what am I trying to achieve with this? That was an early thing, I think. Just reading his stuff, like before I even had met him, just reading his stuff through message boards, years like 2009 maybe, back then, before he was really, developed the popularity he has today. And then it evolved too, because part of me reading that stuff off of message boards was like the way that I interpreted it, you know what I mean? Versus necessarily the way that he meant it. But yeah, that was a big aspect for me, is the recognizing that you can work around things, that you can be creative. That made a difference for me.
There's a quote in the Mountain Dog, I just want to throw this in because you reminded me of it, from Mark Dugdale, who John worked with for a long while. Yeah. And we put it in the book because it was just really pretty cool. It says, Mountain Dog training. This is from Mark Dugdale, IFBB professional bodybuilder. Mountain dog training revolutionized my training and breathed new life into my bodybuilding career. After 20 years of competitive bodybuilding, I've tried countless training methods with varying degrees of success, but nothing returned sustained improvements without injuries compared to John's. At 38, I'm training harder, longer, and more enthusiasm than I did in my 20s. Brutal, intense, masochistically fun, results-oriented workouts define my personal experience working with John Meadows. So, and that was totally true. I remember when all that was going down, because he had done, he was accumulating injuries. Yeah. And Dugdale had such a cool physique, man. He had a great, and he still does. He's still training. Yeah. But, and he was like, what the hell am I going to, he just kept on injuring. I think he just kept on doing heavy squats, and he was getting injuries every 3 or 4 months. And finally he found John, and then I think he had his best contest placings.
I think he did too.
That.
He did. Yeah. Didn't Mark John developed a program for him to train twice a day for one of his preps? Do you remember that?
I think so. Yeah.
He had an AM. So Mark, I don't think had to do any cardio that prep. He was doing an AM training session, a PM training session, and I think it was like back in the morning, and then like maybe biceps or arms at night, and then legs the next morning, and a push day of some sort at night. I remember seeing that program and being like, wow, like this is really interesting and well thought out. Like you could tell John got out the chalkboard or whatever and really laid out like every single week for him in detail. That one really impressed me.
And Mark worked in the food industry, so he's like a really working like 12-hour days type of thing.
On his feet.
So I think that was part of it, just thinking how, what John might have been doing. It'd be interesting to, go back. There's probably an article on Elite FTS somewhere on this, if we dug in.
Yeah.
And it's like, how much time does he have? If he was doing old school training where he's, 2 hours of cardio a day plus a 12-hour day, and then he had I think he's maybe got 4 girls. He had at least three daughters, and maybe he's got 4 now. With Christina is his wife's name. And it's like, when's he sleeping? And I'll put all that together, and like it's a recipe for overtraining injuries.
Sure.
Or little niggles adding up over time. So John's like, okay, we got to figure out how to get the training in, and with all the time he spent on, there's no need for cardio. So yeah, he fit that around, which is, that'd be an interesting one. That's I have a version of my fortitude training called the Family Man Plan. That's a family man plan right there. That a lot of guys need. A lot of competitive bodybuilders need. So hopefully, did that come out as one of his training plans, a formal one? Do you know?
I don't think it did, but you know what? We can look through the archives and see. I can talk to Chris and see what we have, or RJ, and see if we have some of that stuff. That would be a really good thing to put up on the website. And maybe if we could get Mark involved in it, maybe do a quick interview of some sort, that might be pretty interesting.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah, it would be. Such a good guy.
Yeah.
How about you, Andrew? I know that there's a lot, but if you were to say what is something, real valuable that you learned about training from John?
Well, first I would say that I think Scott McNally, you were kind of echoing what Scott was saying about John being in your ear, because the way he writes his programming out, it wasn't just 3 sets of 10 on a hamstring curl and a drop set at the end, or 4 sets of 8 on the leg press, and whatever. Like, there was a description after every single exercise telling you exactly how he wanted it done, so you could visualize it as if he was there coaching you up on how to do the exercise. So I think that's kind of where a lot of the John's your coach in your ear and kind of like coaxing you into what to do and how to do it. But I'll go with just more of a simple thing of how to train specific body parts if you're not getting growth out of them. And for example, like my rear delts, this is my first interaction with John, like in 2012, when I sent him an email. And what blew my mind is that he emailed me back the same day. As busy as the guy was, I mean, imagine how busy you guys are with, like, you got your own training clients and all the podcasts and all the other stuff you do. Someone said shoot you a DM, you want to get back to them, but it might not be your first priority, right?
Right.
I was amazed. Yeah, it can be tough, because I deal with that too. And it's like, it's usually at the end of the night when I'm getting ready to, relax and watch TV or whatever. That's when I pull out the phone and be like, okay, who's not a client that sent me a question? If I got a minute, I'll get back to him. But he got back to me within like 3 hours. And my question simply was, I'm like, something like, hey, so, my rear delts, I feel like just are not there. And, this is kind of what I've been doing. I've tried doing them 2 days a week. I've tried training them 3 days a week. And John was like, okay, what's your rep scheme? And how are you, what are you training in relation to that? Where are you putting them in your workout? And he totally got me changed back to putting the shoulders and chest muscles together and putting my rear delts first in my shoulder workout. And he's like, okay, I want you to do 4 sets of 25 with 30 seconds rest, and tell me how you feel after that workout. And I'll tell you what, man, like, I had never felt my rear delts so full of blood after that. And it was just a simple, machine rear delt machine, rear fly. He's like, okay, so I want you to apply that same thinking, when you're doing dumbbell raises, or when you're doing, cable work on your rear delts. Like, think of something a little bit outside of the box, other than like a 3 sets of 12 or a 4 sets of 10 or whatever. He's like, you got to get to a place where you're building up a lot of metabolic stress there. And I just remember him telling me, like, he's like, I think the rear delts respond better to just this high intensity, crazy rep schemes, very little rest. And just getting a monster pump in there. And I'll tell you what, like, once I started doing that, I actually started to have a little bit of dimension to my side shots. Whereas before it was like, I turned to the side and it's like, where'd he go? I think he's still up there, So like, just, to bring it back, just thinking about different body parts and how to train them maybe a little differently than your other body parts, and maybe even with specific exercises even, we all know that he put a lot of emphasis in the hamstring curls to start off your leg days. I think a lot of times, and I was never like this before, but a lot of times guys will just throw the hamstrings in at the end, 4 sets of 10, check off the box that they got them done.
Yeah.
As an afterthought, and then wonder why when they get on stage and their side shots, it just goes like that. It's not, there's not a nice little drop to it. And, we had a conversation about that too shortly after the dumbbell or the rear delt exercise stuff. So he got me thinking about how to train body parts a little differently and how to apply, intensity to certain body parts a little differently than I had been before. And it all worked out positively. So that's my little
cool.
one thing I learned from him.
Scott
I could go on about 20 other things. But,
I'm sure you could. Scott just sent us a picture of Dugdale here doing looks like some shoulder presses here with John behind him.
Yeah, it was I was kind of looking. There's an article on T Nation that says the title of it is Mark Dugdale Doubles Training Hungry for More. And it looks like it's referring to this program that John wrote up for him. And I was just kind of scrolling through. That was a cool picture. It's largely an ad for all their supplements they were selling at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The plasma jet or something like that. Wasn't there like plasma ball or?
Yes, like every quote has plasma, trademark plasma.
Oh yeah. It's a hyperlink.
It's full of all that, but maybe that would have it in there. Yeah, that's the thing. Sorry, go ahead, Scott.
Well, I was going to ask you about this workout structure summary picture or screen capture that you sent to us. What are we looking at here?
This is what Andrew referred to. This is the basic breakdown of how John would put together a workout. Actually, yeah, you see this in pretty much all the basic workouts. Every once in a while, there'll be an exception from this, but this is how he had structured the workouts in terms of the exercises. They would fill these different, called them different phases, just to sort of keep it give some nomenclature to it. But basically, the exercise of 4 that you would do, this is how we would set up a basic mountain dog training plan. And we did this. It was interesting. We came out with. I'm trying to think if John just said we need to write something. We need to do something together. And I had done fortitude training, I think, at that time. And I said, John, well, what about like a way to get people, to kind of follow your workout strategy and do things the way you've done them. And, of course, the concern was that he would undercut the sales of his regular training plans. And I'm like, I don't think that's going to happen. And it hasn't, of course. People love getting exactly what, John had done and knowing, just being able to sort of go along the training plans with him. But I feel like we lost Scott. Did he go someplace? He's vanished. He knew we can see.
He knew you were going to talk. He knew you were going to go on about something.
Oh, gotcha. There he is. He's back. I was wanting to answer his question. So anyway, this is the exercises, how we set this up. So this pre-pump or activation exercise is what would normally come first. This would be the example. There is a prone ham curl. So that was like a standard. And the next one would be the explosive exercise. It's not a ballistic exercise. It's exactly what we talked about on a podcast, Scott, like a couple months ago, about having sort of an explosive type of activation strategy.
Yes.
Psychologically, essentially, to get the weight moving, but don't just throw it around. So this is like your big exercise. Go ahead.
Would you say it's like a compound exercise more often than not?
Yeah, this is like your standard, like meat and potatoes. Barbell press of some sort, for instance, or a squat, or basic compound exercise, exactly. And then the super maximal pump would be where you put in the intensification techniques. you go to town doing the crazy stuff. And then he recognized the value. And this is pretty cool because John was figuring this out before this literature was really available in the way that it is now. Like he's figuring this out 15, 20 years ago, is that and it makes sense if you're just trying to cover all your bases. You do things like, train in a lower, a medium, and a higher rep range, and you train across the range of motion. And one of the things he recognized was really important, of course, was to train across that range of motion and to have an exercise that trains the muscle when it's in a stretch position, but loads it well. So full range of motion, but under tension. But you got to do this. I'm just reading across the row there at the bottom. But you got to do this in a safe manner, and that happens most safely when you're plenty warmed up. You're not trying to like do some crazy like deficit stiff-legged deadlift as your first exercise out for sets of 4, something like that.
Right.
You're totally warmed up. You've got the pliability in place because you've warmed up the tendons and the connective tissue, so it's going to stretch more easily. But you're also loading in that stretch position, which literally has the potential to change to literally change the length of the fascicles and to produce muscle growth that's specific to the ends of the muscle. If you think about a fusiform muscle, they can see my hands up tall here. Fusiform muscle, right? There we go. And at the ends, like a biceps. So at the end, either end of the muscle, you've got tendon, and then at the ends, you've got the myotendinous junction there, and that's where you can actually see specific growth. If you measure the growth of your basic fusiform muscle or any muscle really along its length, though that training or eccentrically oriented training in particular, and I think loaded also will produce muscle growth that tends to be more specific to the ends of the muscle in that way. So what that means is you're increasing, muscle along its length with your standard training, and also specifically sort of getting the bits and pieces at the ends in this way, and making the muscle longer. If you make a muscle literally longer, the fascicles are now longer. You've increased the muscle mass, so it looks bigger when you contract, or let's say it's a biceps, and you pose the biceps in a shortened position. You've got more muscle volume, which means the muscle's bigger.
Yeah.
So John, intuited that and sensed that. It made sense to him, and he was seeing it in his physique and the people he's coaching, way before the science was pointing that direction. So that's what that last
backed
phase
up by the what was the study with the birds? They hung the weights from the birds.
Studies. Yeah.
I always think back to that study. I know Dante talked about John Perillo releasing and making that study popularized for some of us meatheads that actually like to read the literature. And I think John probably got after he was doing this for a few years himself and intuitively realizing what he was doing, read the research, was like, oh, cool, like I'm on the right path here.
Right. Yeah. That model, like people who are listening will be like, well, that model is so different from what actual weight training is. It's a stretch overload. Like usually, standardly, they'll just hang the weight off the wing, and it's 24/7 for weeks on end. But the muscle is stretched and it's growing, and that's the cool thing. Muscles will accommodate their resting length based on where they're sitting during the rest of the day, or the length at which they're activated. And that's what seems to be happening, especially during like the eccentric based training, which is what you kind of have to do for a smart exercise where you're loading the stretch position. You have to control the eccentric. Sometimes people will do like ballistic stiff-legged deficit deadlifts, but that's the great exactly. It's like, hello, hamstring tear, like just give it to me.
Right.
Let's just pull them both at the same time. So you have to be very, very careful with the eccentrics when you're in that loaded position. Plus, you're training in that stretched position. That's the type of thing that's going to produce muscle growth at the ends of the muscle in the way that it's part of what goes on with that stretch overload. You're not gonna you literally are not going to get the same growth. In fact, like the other way to look at it is if you look at a muscle that is basically deloaded. And if you have it in a stretch position, you will lose very little muscle size. So I always give the example of spinal cord injured people who have disc atrophy because they can't activate the muscle. And a lot of times when they're sitting in their chair, they will plantar flex at the ankle. And you see the calf muscles and basically all the muscles will atrophy in large part. But that stretched tibialis anterior doesn't really atrophy in size. It's about the same size as what you see in able-bodied persons who are walking around, and that's because when you bring it back to a neutral position, you've now compressed the volume of the muscle, and the cross-sectional area is about the same because it's used to being so stretched out. So the muscle senses its length and adjusts its volume and its spatial configurations and its structure to the length at which it's exposed to tension, or the length that it's used to seeing in, its day-to-day life, so to speak. So anyway, so John, figured that out. Go ahead.
Is there any metabolic stress that accompanies like that in terms of buildup of different byproducts or anything that might also accentuate growth, or might also just lead to more growth, or is it strictly just the stretch of the fascicles?
Yeah, well, if you go above like 50 or 60% of an MVC, you're not going to get any blood flow able to come back out. You've just got too much pressure inside the muscle. So that's why, continuous repetitions where you don't drop the weight, you can tell. And that's why people like to pause. They get to the end of the metabolic stress is getting and the fatigue's coming on, so they want to stop. And you can get a good amount of recovery just from a 2-second pause, because you flush out some of those metabolites. It changes also the activation thresholds, because you've got proprioceptors in the muscle that are picking up on the metabolites that are feeding back to the nervous system, to the spinal cord, to inhibit further output, because you've got this fatigue state. So if you take a break and you flush that through, you can get more reps. That's why people want to do that at the end of a set. But if you're stretched on top of it, to get to your question, then you've just simply got to imagine the tension. Like let's say you take a muscle and stretch it to its full maximal length. It's under tension already. So you've already got, even with a lighter, and I haven't seen the study directly, but even with a lower intensity contraction, because the muscle's stretched out, you're going to disallow blood flow in and out more so. So
gotcha.
You do like a continuous tension, like stiff-legged deadlift, the example we've been using, where you don't come all the way up and stop at the top. You keep a little tension, keep your hips, keep your back, 20% from being, perpendicular. You've got tension the entire time, and especially because you're in that, you're going to have metabolic stress galore, which you feel in your hamstrings. Like another example, an easy one is like biceps. If you're doing biceps, where let's say you're doing a standing curl, and you come to the top of that standing curl, not only do you not have much tension, because just the gravity and the torque produced about the elbow, there's nothing there. You can hold the weight up, up here as long as you want. But you take yourself and let's say sit back on an incline bench and let your elbows fall back and do a dumbbell, where now you're stretched, the biceps is stretched at the shoulder. Exactly. And then you come up and now you've got tension at the top. Because unless you do one of these, sorry, people can't really see me, but unless you do one of these numbers, so you've got your forearm perpendicular to the floor, you've got tension at the top, and now you've got this extra stretch at the bottom, and those are a whole other world of hurt if you haven't done those before. And some of that's the metabolic stress. So that's a stretch position. That would be like a biceps exercise, in a stretch position, if you're looking at the way John sequenced things.
I can tell you too that, not even following like actual mountain dog training, having learned the workout structure that he does, I still apply that. Like, I've talked a lot, Scott, with you about doing push-pull legs this last couple of years. And my push-pull legs is still that first exercise. My push day, that first exercise is a pec deck or a fly. And I'm using that to get the chest activated and to get it warmed up. Where then I'm going to move into that heavy meat and potatoes movement, that explosive exercise. And then from there, I'll go to, if I do a third exercise, it would be a machine, where now I'm moving into like super volumizing and pumping that muscle up. I found that for me, I was thinking about this because I was like, you know what? I don't do the stretch at the end of my workouts, a lot of ways that John would. But then I was thinking about it, and I'll focus on the stretch during my workout. So that might be one thing that's different, but I've thought about like the way that I do my lat pull downs now. It's like, for me, it's all about getting that entire full stretch and pulling from activating, from that stretch. Would I still be getting the benefits of what we're talking about with stretching if I were to, say, incorporate that as part of my exercise?
Yeah, he put those at the end just for the kind of the penultimate safety margin. So I think so. It kind of like, there's magic in the order, which is why John kind of had the sequence of doing things.
Well, plus the muscle's so full of blood at that point too. The muscle's,
right?
Yeah, as full of blood as it's got, like you walk into the gym, your muscle's not full of blood. As you do a few sets, yeah, blood's getting in there. But if you've gone through like, let's say 8 or 10 sets, and then you're doing the stretch stuff, and especially right before that, you did, one of the intensity techniques.
Right.
You're going to have a lot of blood in there, and I feel like just the stretch is so enhanced. And I was just going to say, like, if I were to do something like that, I wouldn't actually go for the stretch on the pec deck. I would probably cut it just a little bit short, because I'd be a little scared in my mind that doing a full stretch, being colder, I'll say colder, not as full of blood, right. I'm at more of a risk for injury at that point. And that's why I think John layered the exercise in order that he did, because when you're doing the stretch exercise, you're so full of blood, your body's as warm as it's going to be, you're neurologically so in tune with what you're doing that the risk of injury is so much lighter.
Yeah, I totally agree that I think that does make the most sense. But then I was asking myself, because I recognize that if I'm looking at this structure, for me personally, I'd say, I probably don't do a lot of stretching. But then I thought to myself, well, hey, on my lat pull down, I make sure that stretch is a big part of that. So I guess my question was, what would the value still be of that? Which I can see you can't really answer that question, but I'm sure there is some.
You kind of working.
There's. Sorry, go ahead, Andrew.
I was just going to throw you can measure it if it's working.
Yeah, true.
You know what I mean?
True.
Right. I mean, the simple test is, I don't care what any science paper says. Like, if you're doing an exercise or a particular routine, your back's getting bigger and your body's growing, I'm like, I don't care what the literature says, I think you would probably agree, right, Scott? I mean, as educated as you are and as in tune with the studies, if something's working and we can't necessarily explain it, it doesn't negate the fact that it's working.
Yeah,
that's the bottom line. The thing is,
and that's what I found too, is that with the technique that I'm talking about, it's better. It's like, this is getting me more and getting people I work with more than when we don't do it.
Yeah, if that's if you're fairly certain that you've icing to whatever new growth, then absolutely, that's all that matters, really. It doesn't, if you could have 1,000,001 papers that say, it shouldn't work, and if it does, and so what? Like, that's love a placebo. Give me that placebo effect. I'll take it, baby. If it's working for me, it's working. Yeah. As an example. The only thing I was going to say is a couple things about having a stretch-oriented exercise earlier in your workout is that, if you've totally stretched out, you may and this is totally nitpicky, I think, but you may dampen a stretch reflex, which can be important if you're doing heavy loading stuff later on.
Okay.
Yeah, and there's something too if you're doing heavy stuff where there is, not that you want to rely upon this, but you don't want to have stretched out any elasticity that could be helpful in lifting big weights down the road. So imagine imagine this, and I know you're not doing this, Scott, but just sort of for the sake of a thought experiment. And we know this actually, from the science, that if you stretch aggressively before trying to do maximal performance types of things in the gym, that you do inhibit impaired performance. So a lot of heavy stretching, before a workout will cut your reps down and will impair, especially if you're trying to do plyometric types of things. He's missing me again. He's doing this shit on purpose, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I played college football, and they were pretty in tune with research and whatnot, especially what you're talking about with the stretching. And all of our warm-ups, and we spent 25, 30 minutes before we actually did our first, activity football related. It was dynamic calisthenics or dynamic stretching. It wasn't any of this stretch out and try to elongate the muscle as long as you can and hold it for 45 seconds. It was more this dynamic, high knees, high legs, leg kicks, that kind of stuff, and then some light stretching before we actually engaged in the actual football related activity. And I always thought about that this is going back 20 something years. Like, these coaches were in tune with the research that was coming out back then and applying it the right way, as we now know.
Yeah. I mean, just even if they weren't thinking of it, in terms of myotatic stretch reflexes or any of that kind of stuff, it's like a long, slow, deep stretch is a different mentality, than what you want to have when you're about to go and do power cleans for doubles and triples, that kind of shit. It's a very different thing. It's interesting though, because, in DC training, Dante, who's obviously very revered, he does extreme stretches. That's part of his system. Yeah. And John was basically kind of doing the same thing along the lines of what you're talking about, Scott. in having an exercise, or at least sort of making sure there's somewhere in your routine where your focus load, which is what a DC stretch is. And Dante put that at the end, obviously, because, if you tried to do that beforehand, well, it'd be dangerous, to do that early on, but you do that at the end when you've got this nice pump going, and then you're done, and that's it. That's the last thing. So, yeah, it would be interesting to see what would happen, or how you would like it if you just started putting those exercises where you find that the stretch feels like it's just something, it's a good thing to do, like in the lat pull down or wherever else you're doing that, and just start, intuitively or intentionally putting those at the end of your workout.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, it became an evolution, and I have done the loading stretching, at the end when he would want it to be done. In fact, I think a lot of times, if I think of one of the back things we did when I trained with Shelby Starnes for about 5 years, we did, we followed John's plans for about 4 of those years. I would say that every time that we trained back, we did a dumbbell pullover that was focused on the stretch. Like sometimes we would do other things, but that was the big one. That was the real big stretch usually. And that was always after everything else, after all the, after all the quote unquote hard work,
I think John would layer that. Oh, go ahead.
I think John sent those, like during that time, he would train and then he'd just send what he had done to Shelby. Like
he did. Yeah.
He made that was a very special effort to send Shelby those workouts, like individually.
Yeah. He would. Yeah, he wrote up his whole workout plan, and he'd say, "Hey, and then I did this," and right out there. And then what Shelby would do is just literally print it off, and then we take him to the gym, and then he'd have his notes on what we were going to do next.
So you did mountain dog training for years, Scott.
Oh no, absolutely. Absolutely I did. Yeah. I'm not saying I didn't, but my introduction was different because my introduction was off the message boards, and then me interpreting that. So I didn't mean to say, so my initial, yes.
You're saying you owe John some money is what you're saying.
Lots of money. Yeah. I learned off the message boards, and then I interpreted it for myself, did it on my own, and then when Shelby and I connected, then I got really plugged in from there.
Right. You were going to say something, I think, before, Andrew, if I cut you off.
I started we started talking about stretching, and so I started thinking, like the deep, elongating stretches, static stretches. I think also there has to do with your neurological systems between parasympathetic and sympathetic. I think there's a lot of research that shows, or some research that shows that things like yoga or classes or activities in particular that do elongate the muscles slowly in more of a static position increase your parasympathetic stimulation and lower your sympathetic. So my point was is that you probably wouldn't want to do the long static slow hold stretching when you're trying to engage your sympathetic to be able to lift the heavy ass weight and hit a new PR on something.
Yeah, that would make sense.
I mean, this is not to say that last exercise was a breeze. It wasn't like
you're
saying, okay, like get in your down dog, and stretch your low back or whatever.
Right.
He was doing those are very much still aggressive, but he put those you sequenced those very, very intentionally. So
the other thing I was going to say was about Scott had mentioned how John always, I think, usually in the 1.0 programs would program the dumbbell pullover type exercises last. I do notice that he did start to kind of tailor that in, usually sometimes into the second or third exercise.
Oh yeah.
The first couple back exercises were very arm dominant. So if you did 2 rows back to back, he would write in there, okay, let's give your arms a little bit of a break now and let's stretch it out now.
Huh.
And then the fourth exercise would be something else. But so it's kind of like Chutes and Ladders or whatever, or like one of those books where, do you want this to happen? Go to page 76, or if you want this to happen, go back to page 34.
Yeah.
And so you can kind of pick your own journey a little bit. I feel like he did that a little bit with training and tried stuff out and saw what worked and then passed it on to people, because I think we all know that maybe what you've been doing for the last 6 months might not be what will be advantageous to you for the next 6 months.
So true.
The overall basic plan probably, but you might need to go a little bit of a different direction, whether it's swapping an exercise in or out or changing changing the technique that you're using on an exercise. Like I'll give you an example. Like if someone is very explosive with their dumbbell pressing, I got a kid who I tell him this every week because he always sends me videos and he's getting strong, 140, 150 pounds, and he's like this, but his chest isn't growing. And I'm like, guy, listen, I'm really proud of you for your strength, but I always look at it as, okay, what are you not doing, or what can we do that's almost the complete opposite of how you're performing the technique, and see what we can get out of that. So I'm like, I want you to come down, and I want you to really arch your chest and like really stretch out for a full 2 seconds before you drive up. I go, yes, you're going to cut your weight by like 40% on your top sets. That's great. That's fine. Like we're going to accept that. But what we're looking for is the stimulation and activation, and it's going to be a complete different stimulation and activation than what you've been doing to yourself previously. You got all the explosive strength in the world. Let's change this up.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's apply that somewhere different.
Yeah. The thing that, like, a lot of this has got me thinking about that was so cool about the way John, and it's like, this is talk about a big wise message, is that he wasn't ever afraid to change his thinking about things, and evolve his thinking over the course of an off season or of several months, or over the course of years. Yeah. Things had to be different when you're in your 40s versus in your 20s. I remember John, like in the last year or so, I think he posted some old footage of him squatting. Like like you saw that where he was big. He was really big. Yeah. I don't know what he was squatting. He's like 585 for sets of 12.
No. It was like 720 for like 9.
Holy shit.
Okay. Good God. Was it a video? Was it a video that he filmed on the TV?
That might have been it. Yeah.
Oh, I remember seeing that. Yeah.
Yeah. And they were like, well, what's 7 plates? 685? Is that right? Maybe it was 685 or something like that.
Yeah.
Something like that. Because he had like 7 plates and I think a 25 on each side. And he just he put off like 8 of them like butter. Like the 8th rep looked like the first rep. That to me is like true strength. When your 8th rep looks the same as your first one with that kind of weight, that's amazing. Yeah. And he racked the bar knowing that 9th rep the form was going to fall apart. That's just like complete intuition, being locked in with how your body's reacting to the weight, and knowing, where the edge is and where you're going to fall off and die, and where you can stop and be like, okay, I did some work, and stay safe and do it again next week.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. He was strong as shit, but he wasn't. Yeah, but he didn't try to keep doing that and keep destroying himself. Yeah. With exercise that didn't work.
That's what I mean too. By when we talk about the creativity, when I was saying like he was creative in the gym, he's not afraid to change things as they needed to be changed. And it's just everything.
I think it's also. Well, I was going to say, I think it's also understanding that that increasing weight is not the only driver of muscle growth.
Yes, yeah.
Putting more weight on the bar is not the one and only way. It's a great way to do it, especially early on when you're in your 20s and your 30s up to a certain point. But like we all probably have bad backs, and squatting is probably done a little less often now, and only when the stars align. And we've done a special dance, and we've said our prayers, and we've got a 8-hour night's sleep, and all our meals perfectly. You know what I mean? Like it's like. Yeah. For me to like put a bar on my back now, it's a big difference than when I was like 18 to 25, where I could just walk in there and start off. With
Not even warmed up.
1 plate, 2 plates, 3 plates, 4 plates. I'm good.
Yeah.
It'd be fun to go, and you have access to all these, Andrew, is to go look at like the first 3 or 4 John's programs, and then compare them to the last 3 or 4 that he put out, and see what's different.
That would be cool.
Be a good little training segment for us to do for the website. To just both of us look at them and then have a discussion about it.
The evolution of mountain dog training would be pretty cool.
That would be.
Yeah, he like someone posted, I think it was on the mountain dog training. Maybe it was I can't remember which group it was, but he had I'd forgotten to say like a 28-day program, like train every day for like 30 days straight.
Yeah, like it was called Was it There Will Be Blood or something like that? Or,
yeah, exactly.
Something to that effect.
Yeah. So and then he had one like when people were first doing blood flow restriction, when that was getting big. He had one where there's a shitload of blood flow restriction in there, just to see,
Yeah.
So he was like, that's what's so fun about this. It's that mindset of like, I'm going to just go explore what I'm capable of, and I'm going to go just try some shit that I've never tried before. Yeah. Not be totally asinine about it, but just be willing to explore and step away from like I have to squat, I have to bench, or what have you, and recognize, like John didn't, like deadlifts, he did them early on, but deadlifts weren't, a go-to for him.
Man, and that was something.
Allowing that.
Yeah, I couldn't do them either. And training, like I said, with Shelby, we didn't do deadlifts for years. Like, it became a thing later, but my lower back got so strong because we were doing hyperextensions every week, and it almost worked as a therapy for me. So that having not tried to do deadlifts, but doing, all the barbell rows and the Meadows rows, things where you are bent over, and then coupling that with some sort of a nasty hyperextension that was always the last exercise, was some sort of nasty hyperextension with some sort of crazy drop set on the end. My lower back actually got really, really strong from that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And the pumps were crazy.
Yeah. For better or worse.
He would even write in the programs like, okay, it put the hyperextension, whatever type of, do 150 rep set or do 320 rep banded set, whatever, something like that. But he'd say on it, like, if there was like more arm work to follow, like, or arms or abs, he'd say like, okay, you might want to go do the biceps work first and then come back to this, and then do the ab exercise last, because to pull the blood from your lower back into your abdominals and relieve some of that pump that you got. So there's again just like more intuition about what he was thinking and passing that on to someone else versus just writing the program out and sending it like, do this in this order. Like, it was really, you might want to do this, and I paid attention to those you might want us.
Yeah. How many people have you heard from who got calf growth from doing anterior tib work?
Oh,
Andrew.
Everybody.
Yeah,
so
right.
my training partner, who just competed in a local show recently, he had been, maybe calves was kind of the afterthought, maybe once, maybe twice a week, but 3 sets of 10, 3 sets of 12. And I was having him we were doing calves 4 days a week. Once, started off 2 days, then 3 days, then 4 as he built his recovery up. And we were doing the tib work every single time. And he was like, dude, I think my calves have grown more than anything in this whole program. He's like, I've never seen my calves look like this.
Yeah.
And, calves are kind of an afterthought on stage now, but I think some of us are like really enthusiasts for those types of things. Me personally, I tore my left one, so I got one good one on my right, and my left one just looks kind of like, But
yeah,
just take the right one out then.
I always show my right one when that one's like, oh, let me see your calves.
Yeah.
I'm like, you want to see my calf?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, go ahead, Scott.
I was going to say, I would love to see, it would be a really interesting study. And I think John kind of pinned this back to a blood flow availability issue as far as when you're doing anterior tib and calves. As if you're creating a sort of a blood flow restriction type of effect or a blood flow limitation effect to some degree. There's maybe something neurological going on there. It's just a fascinating thing that would work, but it'd be interesting to see, just in a research study, what happens if you compare just training the plantar flexors versus training the plantar flexors, where you're taking those rest periods and putting in anterior tib work in between. Just to see if there's because it's never been studied before that I know of in that way, and there's so many research models, where we see, of course, all sorts of variation across the subject pool of amount of growth that they get, and the studies are, we just do the knee extensions. It's just knee extensions, like unilateral knee extensions, or that's a great model, but it's not necessarily exactly what might be happening if you're also training the hamstrings or the full leg. Is what's going on there? Is that a factor that somehow, to some degree, it could be anything from something that's going on during the training stimulus to like what's going on in terms of use of that muscle. I've seen studies where they've found that there's been atrophy, like you train the biceps and there's been atrophy in the triceps in the arm they got trained.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. And it's sort of like, okay, we just gloss over that. We're not going to pay attention to that. So it's a unilateral training model, and it happens on one side, but not the other. And why is that? So, if you got people that you're training, let's say, in the study I talked about several times, like 2 or 3 times on one leg per week and 5 times a week on the other leg, and you're seeing differences in muscle size, there is something going on, with whether or not the hamstrings are being trained too, Are they just staying off that leg that's really sore? And would that differ depending on whether the hamstrings and the full leg had been trained in terms of your activity during the rest of the week?
Yeah.
If you're just limping around and favoring that leg, that is the baseline underlying activity, which can also impact muscle size and add to or detract from the overall, environment for maintaining or growing new muscle.
That is interesting.
So there's like all sorts of little things that run through my head. It'd be just interesting to just like do a study, like train one leg, plantar flexors only, regular calf presses, and then the other one do this, match the work, and just add anterior tib work, and EDL work, etc. All the dorsiflexors, and see if it has any impact.
I'm way more of a simple thinker than you, Scott. I just look at who has good calves, and typically like fat people, larger people have better calves because they're just automotive. They're carrying a lot more of a load than we are. I always had fat people and soccer players, because they're doing so much of that plantar flexion, with all the intricate movement they're doing with their feet, with the ball. So when training your calves 3, 4, even 5 times a week, that just made a lot of sense to me. That's just my layman's simple, dumbed down, why train your calves more often and why train your tib as well.
Yeah.
I could see that.
Yeah. Yeah, we're not gonna. I don't want to spiral. I got so many thoughts that are coming to my head with calves, because calves are so interesting and unique in terms of what their function is, and like who has the most functional calves? Well, it's you might say sprinters who don't have very big calves in general. That's like speaking,
or maybe even ballet performers.
Well, they're on their toes the whole time. Sure.
Yeah. And they've got a unique loading history from ballet. So, there's a whole lot.
One of my training partners, he's got calves twice the size of mine, and he trains them a total of 0 times a year. I'm not even kidding. Like,
as do I.
I mean, these things are right. It's amazing. It's crazy because I'm like, "Oh, you're gonna train calves with us?" He's like, and he just walks out. He's like, "I'm done."
Yeah, my like natural inclination is to go on my toes too. So if we were to run, like if we were to sprint, I get up on my toes when I'm going to sprint, and I sprint from the toe. I don't even, like, my heels hardly even touch the ground when I run, if I run real fast. In fact, they don't. Yeah. In order for me to like jog on the treadmill, I have to remember heel, toe. Otherwise, it's just boom, 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 like a gazelle.
And it feels normal. You don't get any calf,
Oh no. They get pumped. And if I were to take something, if I were to hold a lot of water, like a D-ball cycle, oh man, they get wicked pumped. Like, but that's just the way that my body wants to move. Hey, listen, before we were to wrap this thing up, I did want to mention too that Andrew, you are still manning the Mountain Dog website along with Chris, and Scott's been a part of that, and that you guys are still continuing to create content, and it looks like there's some stuff to come. Like Scott, you mentioned that there's a potential idea for a hardcover of the Brutality of Mountain Dog Training. I'd love to see something like that come together, and I'd love to see more content. It's one of those things where John had so much to share, and I know he didn't get it all out there. There's a lot more that I think that he would love for us to be able to learn from.
Yeah, we're me and Chris and RJ, who's the webmaster, we're primarily doing all this stuff, but we got great contributors like Scott's doing a lot of stuff for us. He just put out a great article for us that I think people are going to eat right up.
That's cool.
We're expanding on some things. We're still releasing programs because he had a lot of stuff in the works that he never released.
Right.
So, it'd be great if people could continue, following on his social. Mary's going to be posting some of the stuff through his social media. And then I'll be reposting it, obviously. And I'm sure Scott will and Chris will. But yeah, he just had such an impact on us and had so many great lessons that he taught us that it would be doing a disservice to the industry to not try to keep everything he taught us alive and to keep that information going forward, or at least the way of thinking that he thought about things.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I love that.
Yeah. What's kind of cool too, like this is little teaser, is that L-carnitine, talk that we had that people were like, what the hell's going on with this? And that was a topic that John and I played around with, and like we had I've heard from many people long before recently that John and I talked. We did a Q&A up at Swiss up in Canada, Toronto. Ken Atkins thing, and we like somehow we got on the L-carnitine thing, and many people heard that and they saw the talk, and carnitine got out there. I had the sense from John using it and us talking about it.
Yeah.
And so one of the things I think we're going to do, because it makes sense, is do a recap.
Okay.
And fill in some of the, like here on the Muscle Minds podcast, we'll do that, Scott, like we talked about, answering some of the questions
I love that
people had from YouTube. But and then also do a full-blown article. There it is.
L-carnitine right here.
There it is, yep. And I dug in on that, and I found some interesting stuff. I found some case studies, stuff from the 60s.
Okay.
And there's actually some concrete data that we can point to that will help people realize that I wasn't just like pulling shit out of my ass. There's actually some effects there that are just worth noting. So I'm gonna put that together. It takes a while. It can take 20 or 30 hours to write one of those articles, but I'll get it all together.
If you've ever gotten an article from Scott, there's like 30 references. Like he references everything. Like I'm trying to get better at referencing articles I write, and I look at Scott's work just like, okay, reference this amount of stuff, like you know what I mean? Just to really make it as professional as possible.
That's cool.
Yeah. It's just accountability. It's like, you say something, it's like, how do you know that? It's like, well, unless you came up with it, unless like, so you had like lightning strike you that gave you the novel thought that no one's ever had, then chances are, it came from someone else.
Yeah.
This is obvious. It's basically, it's obvious, and there's no one who would question, today the sky is blue. No one's going to say, oh, he made that shit up. There's never been a blue sky before. Then you don't have to reference that. And otherwise, pretty much everything else, it's probably there's something to substantiate it, which brought that information to your attention. So that's the rule of thumb I use. It's a pain in the ass. Sometimes it's like, oh, Jesus,
I'm sure.
Criminy, but
that's a lot of work, man.
But you find out so much shit that way, That's why, John and I had fun. Yeah, John used to like another story from training. One that popped in my head, just kind of wrapping some of the stuff back around to John. He was telling me we went to train. We trained at that gym that you were talking about, the Lifetime Fitness, I think it was. And we were walking out, and he was telling me about Mark, actually, because this is when he was working with him. And he was saying, Mark sits in a sauna every day. He uses the sauna, and he's like, and John started doing that about that time too. And he's like, what do you know about saunas, man? Like, what's the deal with sauna? I'm like, I really don't know that much about sauna. Literally, this was like a 15-second conversation when we were walking to his car, and he's like, what do you think? What do you say we do an article about saunas? So did an article on sauna, and there's an article on sauna that's up on the site that was like, I didn't know jack diddly about saunas, but dug in and found out a bunch of really cool shit about, how saunas actually are worthwhile. And now, Rhonda Patrick's talked about them.
That's what I was going to say.
Proteins. All this kind of stuff, it's come out, but this was before really that was mainstream information.
Well, yeah. All right, guys. Well, listen, if you want to check out more of the stuff we're talking about, is it mountaindogdiet.com? mountaindogdiet.com. Of course, go to bodyberry.com. You can reach out to Andrew there. You can go to byobbcoach.com, or you can go to Amazon to find Be Your Own Bodybuilding Coach from Scott Stevenson. fortitudetraining.net. I didn't mention our sponsor at the beginning, truenutrition.com, who's always been a friend of John Meadows and of Granite. Use our code THINK for some additional savings. And guys, we appreciate all the support with our programming. I know that a lot of our listeners have been as big of a fan of John as all of us are. We couldn't say it all in one show. I feel like every podcast we've done, he's kind of been there. Whenever we talk about training, he's always there to an extent, and that's not going to end now. So although we can't say it all today, I'm glad that we could take a moment, and I'm grateful I could spend some time with you guys, two people that cared about John very much, and that we could share in this. This was fun. Thank you.
Absolutely, man.
Absolutely.
All right, we appreciate you guys watching. Appreciate your comments. We'll see you guys.